Fear is killing you. Not dramatically, not all at once, slowly, methodically. Every decision you didn't make because you were afraid. Every opportunity you watched pass because terror paralyzed you. Every version of yourself you killed before it could live because fear said no, and you obeyed. Fear said, "Don't speak up," and you went silent. Fear said, "Don't take the risk," and you stayed small. Fear said, "Don't become that," and you shrank back into the familiar prison of who you've always been. You think fear is protecting you. You think that cold dread in your chest is wisdom, experience, your nervous system keeping you alive. It's not. Fear is the most sophisticated control mechanism ever deployed against the human mind. And it's been used against you your entire life. Every fear you carry was installed by something or someone who benefits from your paralysis. The fear of failure keeps you from competing against people who benefit from your non-competition. The fear of judgment keeps you performing for audiences who benefit from your performance anxiety. The fear of rejection keeps you accommodating people who benefit from your accommodation. Fear isn't your protection. Fear is their weapon, and you've been carrying it faithfully, obediently, letting it make every decision that keeps you small, controllable, and theirs. Here's the darkness beneath that. Fear doesn't just stop you from doing things, it stops you from becoming things. Every version of yourself that died in fear, the person who would have taken that risk, spoken that truth, made that move, become that threat, didn't just fail to exist. It was killed, executed by your own terror before it could breathe. You've been murdering your own potential with the weapon they handed you, and calling it caution, calling it wisdom, calling it self-preservation. Here's what Machiavelli understood that you're about to learn. Fear is a tool. It can be used against you, or you can learn to use it. The prince who is controlled by fear loses. The prince who understands fear's mechanics, who can feel it without obeying it, who can dissect it until it becomes absurd, who can accept worst outcomes until fear has nothing to threaten him with. That prince becomes something the fearful world cannot control or predict or stop. I'm about to give you 5 Machiavellian weapons for killing every fear you carry. 5 psychological tactics for annihilating the terror that has controlled your life. Your transformation from fear's prisoner to fear's executioner starts now. Here's the dark truth about where fear comes from. You didn't discover your fears. They were manufactured, installed, programmed into your nervous system through a systematic process of punishment, reward, social conditioning, and traumatic experience. And every fear that was installed by something that benefits from your having it. A child reaches for something and gets punished. Fear of reaching installed. Now the child doesn't reach. Who benefits? Whoever didn't want them to have what they were reaching for. A teenager expresses an opinion and gets socially rejected. Fear of expression installed. Now the teenager stays quiet. Who benefits? Everyone who preferred their silence. An adult takes a risk and fails publicly. Fear of failure installed. Now the adult plays it safe. Who benefits? Everyone competing against them. Fear gets installed through pain association, through social conditioning, through traumatic experience. The fears controlling you right now aren't wisdom. They're scar tissue, wounds that hardened into walls, programming that serves everyone who benefits from you staying exactly where you are. Machiavelli understood fear as a political tool. How rulers use fear to control populations. How fear of punishment prevents rebellion. How fear of loss prevents risk-taking. The population's fear is the ruler's most powerful tool. It's self-enforcing, self-replicating. You have been the population, but here's what changes everything. Manufactured things can be destroyed. Installed programming can be uninstalled. The cage was constructed, and constructed cages can be taken apart, brick by brick, fear by fear. The first weapon for killing fear is dissection. Ruthless, surgical examination of every fear until it's exposed as the mechanical, manufactured, manipulable thing it actually is. Fear lives in fog. It survives through vagueness. It controls you through terror you never examine closely enough to understand. Clarity is fear's enemy. And you're about to become fear's enemy by becoming clarity's instrument. Take a fear. Any fear. The fear of failure, of rejection, of judgment. Now do something you've never done with it before. Examine it, surgically, without flinching. What exactly are you afraid of? Not the general category. The specific outcome. Force specificity. I'm afraid of failure isn't specific enough. Failure of what? At what? With what consequences? Who would know? What would actually change in your life? Watch what happens when you force specificity. The vague terror starts dissolving, because vague terror is infinite. It can be anything, consuming. But specific fear is finite. It has edges, dimensions you can see and therefore fight. I'm afraid of being humiliated in front of people I respect if I try and fail publicly is a fear you can examine. I'm afraid of failure is a fog you can only drown in. Now, examine the probability. What is the actual likelihood of the feared outcome? Not what it feels like, what the evidence suggests. Most feared outcomes have lower probabilities than the fear implies. Fear distorts probability. It makes the unlikely feel inevitable. It makes the improbable feel guaranteed. Examination restores perspective that fear has been deliberately distorting. Now, examine the consequences. If the feared thing actually happened, what would the real consequences be? Not the catastrophized version your fear offers. The realistic consequences. What would actually change? For how long? How unrecoverable would it actually be? Most feared outcomes are survivable, temporary, and recoverable. People have survived them before you. People will survive them after you. Fear hides this reality completely. Examination reveals it completely. Machiavelli wrote about knowing your enemies, understanding their tactics, their weaknesses, their operational mechanics. You can't defeat what you don't understand. Fear is your enemy. Its tactics are vagueness, probability distortion, consequence catastrophizing. Its weaknesses are specificity, probability reality, consequence examination. Now you know how to fight it. When you dissect fear surgically, it becomes absurd. The enormous, consuming, life-controlling terror becomes a small, specific, improbable, survivable thing that you've been giving enormous power to. Not because the examination made it smaller, because examination revealed how small it always was. The second weapon is Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic practice of deliberately imagining worst outcomes and accepting them completely, not hoping they won't happen, actually accepting them, until you're genuinely okay with them occurring. Fear requires hope. It needs you to believe that the feared outcome would be unacceptable, catastrophic, something you couldn't survive. Fear's power comes from your belief that the worst case is unbearable. Remove that belief, accept that you can bear the worst, and fear evaporates. Because fear with nothing to threaten you with isn't fear, it's just imagination. Marcus Aurelius contemplated daily what he might lose: his power, his health, his loved ones, his life. Not to suffer, but to remove fear's grip. You cannot be threatened with losing something you've already accepted losing. Take your deepest fear, the one that controls you most completely. Bring it into full focus. Now accept it. Walk through it happening in complete detail, and then sit with the question: could I survive this? Could I continue existing? Could I rebuild? The answer, for almost every feared outcome except physical death, is yes. You could survive failure, rejection, humiliation, financial ruin, the destruction of your reputation. None of these are deaths. All of them are survivable. All of them have been survived by countless people before you. Accepting that you could survive them removes fear's primary weapon. When you genuinely accept the worst outcome, when you're actually okay if it happens, fear's command structure collapses. They can't threaten you with it anymore, because you've already made peace with it. This isn't nihilism. You still want things. You still work toward them. But you move toward them without fear's hand around your throat, the third weapon and the darkest reframe. Fear isn't a stop sign, it's a compass, and it's pointing with perfect accuracy at exactly where you need to go. Everything you fear is something that has power over you, and things that have power over you control you. The only way to remove their power is to face them, which means your fear, mapped precisely onto what controls you, is also a perfect map of where you need to walk to become free. You fear public humiliation? That fear is pointing at public visibility as the exact territory you must conquer. You fear rejection? That fear is pointing at putting yourself forward repeatedly until rejection loses its sting. You fear failure? That fear is pointing at taking significant risks as the territory you must repeatedly enter until failure no longer paralyzes you. The things you avoid because you fear them are precisely the things that keep you small, and the things you must move toward are precisely the things that terrify you. Fear isn't telling you to stop. It's telling you where the growth is, where the freedom is. Your fears are marking valuable territory. The social visibility others fear keeps competition low for those willing to be visible. The risk-taking others fear keeps competition low for those willing to risk. Every fear you carry is pointing at territory that's empty because everyone else is too afraid to enter it. Enter it. Conquer it. This reframe is terrifying because it means you can't run from fear anymore. Every avoidance becomes a failure to go where your compass is pointing. But it's also liberating, because you always know where to go next. Wherever fear points, that's the direction. Fear is your map, and now you know how to read it. The fourth weapon is systematic exposure, the deliberate, repeated, methodical entry into feared situations until fear dies from overexposure. You're not trying to feel comfortable. You're trying to kill fear through attrition, and fear dies when it's faced enough times that it becomes boring. Exposure works because of how the brain processes threat. When you encounter a feared stimulus, your amygdala fires. But if the feared thing doesn't produce the catastrophe it predicted, your brain updates its threat assessment. Slightly. Each time you face the feared thing and survive, that assessment decreases. Repeat this enough times and the fear is extinguished. You fear public speaking. Speak publicly, over and over, not once, not twice, hundreds of times, in front of small groups, large groups, hostile audiences, until your brain has processed enough repetitions that standing before people is as threatening as walking to the refrigerator. You fear rejection? Get rejected, deliberately. Ask for things you know you'll be turned down for. Approach people who will say no, not to succeed, to be rejected, over and over, until one more no is neurologically uninteresting, until your brain has heard it 500 times and the catastrophe never came. You fear conflict? Create conflict, express disagreement, hold positions under pressure, let people be angry at you, until conflict becomes familiar through sheer, repeated exposure. Machiavelli understood that soldiers become effective not through theory, but through battle. Combat familiarity doesn't eliminate fear. It domesticates it, makes it manageable, turns it from master into information. The first time is the hardest. The 10th time is hard. The 50th time is uncomfortable. The 100th time is boring. That's the protocol. That's how fear dies, not from a single brave moment, but from 100 repetitions that make fear ordinary. Here's who you become when fear is dead. You become what every fearful person around you is afraid of. Not because you're threatening, because you're free. And free people are terrifying to people who are controlled, because your freedom reminds them of their chains. Your courage reminds them of their cowardice. When fear is dead, every decision changes. You speak when speaking would have been silenced by terror. You act when action would have been frozen by dread. Every single moment that used to be controlled by fear becomes a moment of sovereign choice. What do you actually want? What do you actually think? What do you actually need to do? These are questions fear never let you answer honestly, because fear had already answered them. Don't. Stay small. Stay safe. Stay controllable. When fear is dead, you get to answer them for yourself for the first time. And the answers are different, larger, more dangerous, more alive. Machiavelli's prince without fear is ungovernable, cannot be controlled through threats because threats require something to threaten, cannot be manipulated through terror because there's no terror left. The fearless prince doesn't just rule differently, he exists differently, as a different category of being that the fearful world has no tools to manage. You become that category. And here's the final dark truth. You won't just do things differently, you'll attract differently. The fearless person has a different gravitational field. People sense fearlessness the way they sense danger, at an instinctual primal level. And they respond to it the same way, with either desperate attraction or defensive hostility. Both are appropriate responses to something genuinely powerful. Both confirm the transformation worked. The fearful version of you attracted people who wanted someone manageable, someone they could use fear to manipulate. They were drawn to you because your fear made you safe for their exploitation. When fear dies, they leave. And what comes instead are people who respect power, who are drawn to fearlessness, who want proximity to someone who has killed what's killing them. Fear's death is your birth. The limitations that fear built around you, all the decisions not made, risks not taken, versions of yourself never allowed to breathe. Those walls come down when fear dies, and behind those walls is the person you would have been all along without the terror they installed to keep you manageable. The actual you, the dangerous you, the free you. Kill your fear, kill your limitations, kill every chain they installed through terror. Your transformation doesn't happen when fear stops appearing. Fear might always appear. The transformation happens when fear appears and you don't obey it. When terror fires and you walk toward it. Until acting through fear becomes so familiar that fear stops being meaningful signal. Until fear appears and you think, good, this is where I need to go. Kill your fear, not once, every day, every time it appears. With dissection, with worst-case acceptance, with the compass that points toward it, with exposure that makes it boring. Kill your fear and discover the person you were before they made you afraid. Subscribe. Hit like, comment. Fearless if the terror that controlled you just died. Share this with someone paralyzed by fear, someone who needs to know that fear was manufactured, and manufactured things can be destroyed. The old you obeyed fear and stayed small. The new you kills fear and becomes everything fear prevented. You're not afraid anymore. You're dangerous, and dangerous is what survives. Thanks for watching.